Hello, and welcome to the Repeat Testing in Qualtrics tutorial video. I am Paul Byrne, Research Data Services Librarian at Syracuse University Libraries. What we will cover in this tutorial is how to have respondents retake a test automatically, how to set up the survey flow to achieve this, which embedded data elements you will need, how to manipulate the redirect URL and the custom end of survey, and how to manipulate the URL and the email distribution if you will be distributing this via the contact list. In repeat testing, sometimes you want to have the respondent repeat a test until they achieve a certain score. You can also limit the number of tries. This can be accomplished by using embedded data and manipulating the URL of the survey and the custom end of survey element. The basic scoring of the test is the same as for a regular test. Therefore, this tutorial assumes that you have watched the basic testing in Qualtrics video. You'll need to make some upfront decisions before building your survey if you want to carry the respondent's answers from previous attempt or have a blank test for each attempt, what grade or score they will need to achieve, and how many times you will allow them to take the test. Most of the work is done in survey flow. You will create embedded data fields for trial, person ID, grade, and if you are using a contact list, email ID. You will also use branching to set the embedded data values and the redirect link in the custom end of survey. The redirect link will determine the behavior of the data collection. Let's take a look. And here we are in Qualtrics. Before we really get started here, I want to repeat that you might want to open up this document that I've added because it will show all the different fields that you can use, and you can make your own notes on this. For these embedded data fields where you'll be seeing these later, you can just copy and paste these right in from this document into Qualtrics. The only one you can't really do that with is the one here for grade, because this code right in here will be different for your application. You can also come down further and we have various forms of the URLs that you will need. And again, you can copy and paste these in as well. You'll just need to change this part of the URL to whatever is appropriate for your particular application. So let's get back into Qualtrics. And here we have just a very basic test. There's 4 questions, similar to the introductory video. And then there are 2 more questions. One that gets shown if the person does not pass the test, and then another if the person does pass the test. And all of this is taken care of and I guess directed in the survey flow. So let's go over and take a look at that. In the survey flow, it's somewhat odd, but we are starting with a branch. And this is for trial. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. There we go. You can call it trial, you can call it attempt, you can call it whatever you like. Just be consistent throughout wherever you see this. And it says if trial is equal to 0. And basically this means if this is the first time the person is coming into the test. And you'll see that this actually gets set in the URL in the survey, like the anonymous survey link. Then we have person ID, and this is the response ID built-in embedded data field. Every time the person comes back and retakes the test, this response ID will be different, and you won't be able to match each of their trials one after the other. So that's why you need to set it to person ID on the very first trial. And again, we'll be carrying this through using the URL. Email ID does the same thing. You only need this if you are using a contact list. If you're just using an anonymous link that you're posting on a web page or sending to a listserv, then you don't need the email ID. It's not going to hurt anything if you have it in there. Then we have our test. You can have one big block or a whole bunch of blocks, whatever makes sense for your testing situation. Then we come down, we set some more embedded data. We increment the trial by 1 each time the person comes through. Then we also set an embedded data for grade, which is just the total score on the test as calculated by the scoring. You can usually set this through the embedded data field pipe text thing, but this score isn't always available. You can do it in the embedded data and some other places, but not everywhere. And so that's why I suggest creating your own embedded data field, because this will be available anywhere you need it. Speaking of which, we come down to the branch. If the grade is equal to 0, namely they did not pass, we'll show the question that says, sorry, you didn't pass, you have to do it again. And then there's the end of survey, custom end of survey. So you come over here to customize, and here's the URL, the redirect URL. And this is really what drives, what makes it possible for people to repeat this test as many times as you want to allow them to, and still know who is taking each test and how many times. And then the branch is if the person passes the test. One thing I needed to mention is, here it's just based on grade. If you want to edit the condition, you can also add a condition for how many trials or whatever other conditions you want. And of course, you could do the same if they pass the test. And that is the basic setup for the survey flow. And of course, we'll just take a quick look. We already have the scoring set up for the various questions. Of course, the last two can't be scored, and you don't want to score them anyhow. One thing that I mentioned in the previous video, the basic testing, is you can have the scoring summary shown at the end of the survey. You definitely do not want to do this in this application, because If the person comes through the first time around and does not pass, this will show them all the correct answers, and they can either just open the uh, test in another window and go back to the correct answers. So you definitely do not want to show them the scoring summary. And we'll go back to the survey builder. In developing the redirect URL, you have two choices. There can be a blank test for each attempt, or you can carry answers from a previous attempt. In developing the redirect URL, the first part of the URL is the URL to your main survey. In this instance, in this example, if you are at a different institution than Syracuse University, then obviously the very first part of this URL will be different. But this is the basic URL to your survey. All of this is followed by a question mark. You've probably seen this in other URLs before. Then the embedded data fields for trial, or number of attempts, and person ID, which is an identifier to match one record to another. So the main part of the URL that always stays the same looks like this. As you can see, that gets quite long and a bit complicated, so I strongly suggest building or developing this URL in a word processor or something like Notepad, and then you can always just copy and paste it back into Qualtrics. If you want a blank test for each attempt, then that basic URL that we just saw is sufficient. If you want to carry the answers from a previous attempt, then you need to add this to the end of the basic URL. If you are distributing your test using a contact list, you'll need to add some more to the end of the URL, namely the email ID. So the final redirect URL might look like this. Again, you will want to build this in a text editor. Let's take a look. So now that we have our test all set up, and we've done the scoring, and we've set up the survey flow, we're ready to distribute the test as well as build the redirect URL that goes in the custom end of survey element in the survey flow. So to start, we'll come over to distributions, and we'll start with the anonymous link. And we have the basic link there, and we'll just do copy survey link. And I strongly suggest having a blank Notepad, Word, or anything else to do this, because these URLs can get pretty long and complicated. And that right there is our basic anonymous link URL and where we start. So I'm going to leave that there, and we'll move down. We'll copy it again. Now, for the very first time that a person goes into the test, you'll want to set the trial. So it's question mark trial equals 0. And now this URL is what you can paste into web page or send via listserv. And it's just the basic anonymous link with trial equals 0. If you recall, in the survey flow, the very first element was a branch saying, is this the first trial? Is this trial 0? And then start setting up various things from there. Now we also need to start building the link that we will use in the redirect in the survey flow. So this gets to be a little bit different from the first time they come in. Of course, there's the question mark. And now what you can do is come back to this document, and then we can just copy and paste right from here. This will work. If I can actually get it to do it. Now let's take a look at this. Here you see we have trial equals, and this is the embedded data field that we use to increment in the survey flow. Person ID, just to be able to match records from one trial to the next. And this is the basic form. With this particular form of the URL, each time the person comes in and retakes the test, they will have a completely blank test. All of their previous answers will not be shown to them. Of course, it's recorded in the data, but the person taking the test will not see their previous answers. So what we can do now is just copy all of this. And we'll go back to the test, the survey, and then into survey flow. And come down to the customize link. I'll erase what was there previously. And then just paste it back in. Now if you'll notice, I took out that HTTPS that was left in there. Always go back in, whenever you use the redirect, go back in and make sure that there isn't a double HTTPS in here, because of course when it goes to redirect it won't find that page and you'll be scratching your head wondering why it's not finding the page. And it's because the URL in here got messed up. So we'll go ahead and click OK, click Apply, go back to the builder. Now we have to publish. And now we're actually good to go. And come back here. And I'm going to copy and paste this. And here we're in our test. I'm going to deliberately fail the test. So you can see it's trial 1, my grade is 0, I need to retake the test. So click submit, and it redirects me, and you can see my previous answers are not here. I'm going to deliberately fail once more. See, this is trial 2. Grade is 0, need to retake. Now I'm going to pass. Remember, we set it up so that we only needed a 1 to pass. I did that just to make things a little bit easier for demonstration. It says this is trial 3, your grade is 2, you have passed. Hit submit. And it says thank you for taking the time. So we can close that up. Let's go back to Qualtrics. Let's take a look at the data that was collected. And here's our data. I'm actually going to make this a little bit smaller so that we can see everything a little bit better. You can see response ID. As I mentioned, every time you come in, retake the test, Qualtrics assigns a new response ID. So we created the person ID field, and it takes the very first response ID and carries that through each one. So now that you know, all of these records belong to this same person. We didn't set any of the email, so those are all blank. And we have trial, 1, 2, and 3. The score is the score from the scoring mechanism, and of course we have grade. And so you can see Qualtrics will, the way we've set it up, you know each of these records are from the same person. You know which trial it is, and of course the last one tells you how many tries it took, and of course their grade. So let's go back to the survey. Now in the survey flow, as I mentioned, the way we set up this redirect URL, as you noticed, each time we retook the test, it was blank. All the previous answers were not visible. Sometimes you might want that. Even if this is just a regular survey, you want people to see their previous answers. Well, you need a slightly bigger redirect URL. So we can start with the one that we had where it does not carry. I'll copy that and paste it. And then what you need to do is take this last little piece here and copy and paste that to the end. And now we'll take this and copy and paste it back into our redirect URL. And make sure that our URL is correct. We'll say OK. And we'll click Apply. Publish. Now we can take our test again. And we use this first URL. Come through, First trial, 0. We need to retake it. And as you can see now, the answers that I put in the first time are in here. I'm going to change my answers. The same here. Route 2, we need to retake it. Now those answers. Two, you have passed. Close that up. And we'll go back and we'll take a look at the data again. And here's our data. And you can see the new set started here. Person ID is carried through, the number of trials, etc. The only difference, of course, as you saw, is that each time I retook the test, my previous answers were displayed, were carried through. There are two basic ways you can distribute your test. Like any other survey, you can distribute it using either an anonymous link or a contact list. If you are using an anonymous link, it is a basic URL, just the anonymous link that Qualtrics will give you, with a question mark and trial equals 0 at the end. For a contact list, in the invitation email, you need to create your own link to the test. You need to use the other link type under protocol when inserting the link, and then you need to use this particular embedded data field. Let's take a look. So now that you've created your test and you've done all the scoring and you've built out your survey flow and put in the customized redirect link to loop back through, you're now ready to start distributing your test. And the two main ways of doing that is to use either an anonymous link or an email distribution using a contact list. With the anonymous link, as we've mentioned, you can just use the basic anonymous link and then simply add trial equals 0 at the very end with the question mark, so that this whole thing can be put in a web page or in an email to a listserv or even an email to individual people. It won't track who is taking the test, but it will, as we've seen, initiate the test and start going through. The other main way is to use an email distribution along with a contact list. This is a little bit more involved than just using an anonymous link. So we'll click on Compose Email, and we'll do contacts. As I say, make a contact list of just yourself. I'm going to send it right now. And what you need to do is remove this link here and replace it. So the easiest thing to do is to just click somewhere in the email, come over here to link, and you can put in whatever text you like. Leave the link type as URL, but you need to change protocol to other. And then from this point, you can come back to this document and just copy this code right in there. Click OK. Now you see it says take the test. I'm going to leave this one in here for just now, just for demonstration purposes. The other thing you need to change is this copy and paste URL. And all you really need to do here is just put in and trial equals 0. So we'll send it now. And we can see the distribution says sending. And as you probably know, this can take a couple of minutes. All right, it's sent. And here is the email. Let's open this up a little bit. Here's the link that we created. And if you look closely, you can see that it has trial equals 0 at the end. And so we'll click on it. And there's our test. Let's go back. If you look at the original, if you look in there, there is no test equals 0. So it won't actually work to repeat the test. And then, of course, there's the copy and paste URL. And you see it has the trial equals 0 at the end. So let's, just for demonstration purposes, copy and paste this. And there we are. Now, as you're testing, you may need to try that out a couple of times. Maybe you made a typo. Maybe you want to, of course, build out the message in the email. You want to come back to the distributions here and delete any previous distributions. Because if you sent it to yourself and then you go in and you try and start again, Qualtrics is probably going to have a problem with that. So the easiest thing, anytime you're testing email distributions like this, go back and delete the distribution, and then Qualtrics should forget that you've ever taken the test or the survey before. And so that is how you can have your respondents repeat a test or even just a survey until they've achieved a certain score or number of tries, and send it out either using an anonymous link or using an email distribution. In conclusion, you can have respondents take a test multiple times until they have achieved a certain grade. Respondents can start each attempt with a blank test or with their previous answers pre-populated. This is all accomplished through the use of embedded data and manipulation of the redirect URL. Careful planning and testing is key to making sure everything works as you intend. Thank you. We hope you found this tutorial useful. Please see our other tutorials at these addresses.